information, if there's a time when you want me to talk to the board, I'm happy to do that as well.
No, I just want to let them know all the good work they're doing with it. You know?
Yeah, I added a couple of slides to the end of that,
Yeah.
so you'd have the information, but if you want it in a different format.
I mean,
can
it's
do that.
impressive. We have an HR director
Hi, friends. I feel like it's been so long since I've seen you.
Sometimes that's not a bad thing, Hinda.
I know. People don't like to talk to me. It's okay. Bye.
We've communicated through email a lot.
We have. We have.
Hi, Sue.
I may hide my video for a little bit while I'm eating pizza here. Not too long. I haven't managed to pull off dinner yet. And by pull off, I mean get ordered.
No problem.
I don't think there's been a meeting, Hinda, that I haven't eaten through. Both live, both when we were in person pre-pandemic, and so it's sort of like my habits didn't change, but I eat constantly through these meetings.
Oh, your hair looks amazing. Did you get it cut?
I did. Thank you.
I'm usually trying to figure out what Jennifer's eating.
Right. It's been a little bit more creative since we've been home, but like usually in committee meetings, I'll have like something in a bag that I can just like eat, or like, you know, like crackers or something like that. Or the board meeting, I'm always like sneaking something out of my bag to like eat it while there's like updates.
We could have a hashtag. What's Jennifer eating?
Hello.
Hey, it's 6:30. I think we have 4 board members here. I think I'm going to go ahead and just start the meeting if that's okay with everyone. Is there any objections to that? No? Okay, good. All right, so welcome to the Student Learning and Achievement / COVID Community Task Force or COVID Community Committee meeting. It is, gosh, what date is it? It's January the 27th and it's 6:30. I would like to call the meeting to order. Present from the board tonight, we have Mrs. Piclantonio, Mrs. Mooring, Mr. Hairston, and myself, Mrs. Chrysler. And I'd just like to remind everyone that this is a live stream meeting. And so all of our panelists, we are live on our YouTube channel and being recorded. And so it's not like the typical task force committees that we have with our task force group, which are just, private Zoom meetings that aren't streamed. So just want to keep that in mind for everybody that's attending. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mrs. Elliott, and we can go ahead and start the meeting.
Thank you. So welcome everyone. In addition to Jennifer and Burl, who are our board members that serve on the task force, this evening we are joined by Hinda Mitchell and Sue Wigging, as well as Mr. Barrett. We may have some additional task force members joining us a little bit later, and so we might see some other people pop on, but we will go ahead and get started, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so, the purpose of this community committee meeting is to have an opportunity to get together and share with the Gahanna community about some of the conversations that we've been having in our task force meetings. And so tonight we're going to talk about a few different topics that, are pertinent to our current situation in the pandemic. And the first one is actually going to be starting with taking a look at our new microsite. So we did share information already with the community. We know that this pandemic has had, immense amounts of communication that have been coming at our staff, our parents, community members. And, we were previously hosting everything on a web page on our website, and found that it was just, so much information and overwhelming, and some families were having a hard time finding the important information they really needed. So part of the recommendations from the task force were for us to really work on creating a COVID-19 microsite that our families would be able to, more easily navigate the important information that they are needing while navigating this pandemic with us. So we had the opportunity to partner with Hinda and her team at Inspire, who helped us with this, very concise microsite. And I'm hoping that since we shared it, some families have already been able to use it as a resource. I am going to click into it and just kind of click around a little bit. I'm not going to highlight everything on the site. Obviously, you can see that up here at the top, we do have some, hot radio buttons that provide additional links to information. So under academics, there's some information that highlights our learning models, as well as the updated 2021 school calendar. We have a program radio button that would give information specific to school meals and transportation. And I know that we were working on some new communication related to our school meals. So I am thinking, I'm not actually positive if it's been updated just yet, but if it hasn't, it will be in the next few days. But this is a place where families can go to take a look at information related to in-school meals, and then how to order and access the grab-and-go meals. We also have transportation information that's helpful to families. And then here in our health and safety section is where you'll find some of our health and safety guidelines that we have been highlighting in our schools and using in a very successful manner to keep our kids and our staff safe. We did update the flow charts that were recently shared out. And so you can find those easily on this microsite. We do recognize there's a lot of text on this particular resource, but we did end up adding these close contact definitions after a recent communication went out, because we just wanted our families to have everything in one location. So the flowchart information, as well as some of the specific safety protocols that are being used every day in our buildings and in our classrooms, as well as FAQs and some resource links. And then this particular radio button gives technology support to families. The mental health section, we had a really great effort over the holidays that allowed our students to receive support even when we weren't in school. And so, we're really proud of the support we were able to provide families. And this is a page that provides additional support for families regarding mental health. So back on the homepage itself, I highlighted some of the items that you'll see in the radio buttons. Back on the actual homepage, you will see this is where we have our Cova Dashboard, and this information is updated each week. Sue Wigging is on here, and I asked Sue if she would maybe just help to describe, what we mean by confirmed cases, students in buildings, students not in buildings, staff in buildings, staff not in buildings, because that was actually at our board meeting, something that came up last week as a little bit of a confusing point. So we added some additional definition here. But Sue, would you mind just kind of helping to explain that to those watching?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. So in looking at the numbers, what you will see is that we do separate positive cases when there is a student who's been in our building or an extracurricular activity 48 hours prior to their symptom onset or a positive test collection. And so we consider those in our buildings if they were there 48 hours prior to, or out of the buildings if they were not there 48 hours prior to the onset or the positive test collection. Students and staff not in the building would include all of our distance learners that at no time do they enter our building. And so those are captured after they're reported to us in the not in the building group as well. Our nurses and our clinic aides help us monitor based on the date of reporting whether a student is considered in the building or not in the building.
Thank you, Sue.
Mm-hmm.
And then down below also on the dashboard, you'll see our quarantine cases as well. And as Sue mentioned, those are based on, when they're reported to us is how they get captured and included in our data. So are there any questions or any things that the board members or anyone else maybe would like me to highlight, or any questions you've received that maybe the microsite could help with before I move on?
So those numbers represent since the beginning of March, since we've been tabulating?
No, that's a great question. So these particular numbers are from, we run them from Friday to Thursday, so it's a weekly look. So these particular numbers capture data from January 15th through January 21st. Okay.
Any other questions? I think, I guess just a couple comments. I first of all want to say thank you, because this was something that I think was really important to the task force in one of the first meetings that we had, and really just understanding from their perspective, not only as just health professionals in various fields, but also as parents, how we can better organize information and make it available to our students and our staff. I do think that I appreciate the explanation with respect to the in building and out of building. And I think there was there's a question as to why does it matter out of building, but I think we're looking at a big picture as a district and really trying to make sure that we understand how this is or isn't spreading through the district and in our community. And I think this dashboard and including that information does help us to kind of understand what's happening, at least in our Gahanna-Jefferson community itself. So I think that is a valuable piece of information, but it does warrant the clarification that you put on there, which I think is great. I think everything's very clean and easy to read. I had some opportunity to spend time in it. One of the things I did receive a comment about, and this is just a technical issue, is that I think folks who already might have, whether they're smart devices or their phones, if you don't refresh your page with the Gahanna-Jefferson School District website. So like on my phone, when I go to our district website, I actually don't get this dashboard. When I go to the homepage, I still get the old information. So there were folks that were getting the correspondence. And so I don't know if just in our next newsletter update, generally we announce that this is out there as a resource. It might also be helpful for building principals or for just us to remind people that, hey, you need to refresh your page so that you're able to see this information.
So Jennifer, were you saying that when you were accessing it through your phone, that's when you had to refresh it to get it to show?
Yeah, so yeah, and in fact, I asked the question, I think the other night at the board meeting, I was surprised that it had gone live, and because I kept checking, but it's because my phone wasn't refreshed. And so I had a couple people who received the correspondence from the district who were like, I don't see where anything's changed. And so I don't know what the technical issue, because I'm not a technical person, but when I refreshed, I was able to it was like everything reset, because I have that saved as one of my favorites. And so when I go to it, it must just automatically open from where I left off before or something like that. I'm not sure technically what happens, but
yeah, so maybe it's something related to the cookies that are stored or something like that. But we can talk to Judy about getting that in the newsletter for sure.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the only other observation, Jill, that I would make is that in the development of the site, we were really intentional about what was and wasn't included on here. I think if everything is important, then nothing is important, right? And so we really spent some time looking at where our community was spending time on our site. What is the information they were looking for? For example, transportation and school meals, big part of that. That's something that people were often looking for data on or for information on. And so, as we prioritized what would live on this new COVID microsite, just know that we were intentional about selecting those topics and that data that was most relevant to our school community.
Right. Thank you, Hinda. Okay, so heading back into the presentation, let's see here. Make sure I can get to. Okay, so this next part of our conversation this evening is going to be focused around some data points that we've been talking about as a task force. And, one of the things that we have been, I think that has been a challenge all throughout this, this pandemic situation is really, determining the best indicators that would signal the need for us being in full distance learning or us being in our hybrid model. And then of course, working to get kids back in full time into the buildings. And one of the things that, I think is important for us to point out is that many districts, in the beginning, we started looking at those county alert levels, and we shared some graphics, we shared some information that was going to tie our learning models to those alert levels. And what we quickly learned was that there was just new information constantly coming from this pandemic situation. And it was hard for us to really follow what we originally thought were going to be the best guidelines for our district. And so one of the things that local districts around us started to do then was transition to what they were referring to as decision trees. We started to get more data. We started to look at case rates per 100,000. We started to partner with different data organizations and, start to move on to the next best kind of decision-making model for how to make those determinations. And as a task force, one of the things that we were really spending some time talking about is what are those data points that are most important to safe operations in our building? And, and how can we use those data points to guide our decisions? But the key there is that word decisions, because, as we know, each data point, each day presents something new for us. So we really processed as a team that we didn't want to necessarily put on paper what was going to be our decision maker. We instead fell back on this idea of what are those data points we want to look at that would trigger a conversation about a learning model change. And so what you're seeing on this slide here are some of those data points that we felt would be necessary for us to be watching and use as indicators for us as a task force to be getting together to talk about a learning model change. So the first one there,
Jill, your screen is not showing the slide that you're discussing.
oh no. Let me see.
On the website.
Oh, it's still on the website?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can fix that really quickly.
I was like, I need to refresh again.
I just did a whole lot of talking. That's okay. Just now getting ready to get into the slides, so.
That's all right. It's like anticipatory. I like it.
Thank you, Sue. All right, let me share again. How about now? Are we seeing it now?
Yep, we're there. Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So all of that information I just provided kind of leads us to this slide. These are the 4 data points that we as a task force decided we really wanted to have a watchful eye on. The first one is related to school spread evidence. We're seeing a lot in the news. We're hearing a lot from our health officials that data is not showing that there's a lot of school spread because it's a controlled environment. So we wanted to really take a look at, based on the data we have in our district, you know, we want to be monitoring what that school spread looks like. And so Sue Wigging, who oversees our school nurses, and they've been doing a phenomenal job with the data tracking. And I can't explain to people enough the number of hours that these individuals are putting into working with families and making sure we have as accurate of information as possible. So Sue and her team worked on kind of gathering some baseline data related to school spread. And so I'm going to pause talking and I'm going to ask Sue to just give an overview of, you know, the work that they did to kind of give us that baseline of where we maybe were with relation to school spread.
Sure. So last fall, prior to winter break, but actually prior to Thanksgiving break as well, we took 10 days and we analyzed the positive cases and looked back 14 days before each positive case was reported to us. And we closely looked at each student and tried the best that we could to determine if their positive case was a result of being exposed in our school setting. So we looked at close contact tracing that we had done, anybody that we had put into quarantine. We looked at class lists and see if we had missed anything. We just tried really hard to just connect dots that maybe were there and we had already identified and put into our data, and maybe dots that we had missed. And we found very, very few examples of students or staff that were reported positive to us that had previously been exposed to a positive case in our school setting. So what we were doing to keep students and staff safe was working. We then continued that monitoring, and we're now doing that daily since the start of the 21 calendar year when we returned from winter break. And the data shows to be very accurate compared to what it was in our baseline, is that we have very, very few to none no students or staff that have been identified as a positive case that were directly related to school exposure. So we have now put into practice with each positive case reported to us, we just instantly go back and analyze the situation. So we're not doing 10 days worth at a time and many, many students at a time. And our school nurses are the individuals responsible for, again, just going back and checking. And we err on the side of caution each time, that if we think we don't have enough information and we believe that there is a likelihood, we will count that as a school exposure, because we're not scientists and we don't know, and we want to do our due diligence to put additional safety features into play if we need to, or to confirm that our practices are effective. And honestly, the message that we're getting right now is what we're currently doing is working. The variable that has changed most recently, and it was effective, I believe, on the 15th, without having a calendar in front of me, is the algorithm for how we are now conducting close contact tracing. So that may actually on the 29th, 14 days later, which is Friday, may change a little bit of what we are finding, but that is yet to be determined.
Thank you, Sue, for sharing that process. the school spread is definitely something that we get a lot of questions about from the community. Just curious, when you see high numbers like 264 students on quarantine, it doesn't feel that way. But in actuality, based on, again, though we're not scientists looking at the data we have, we really do feel like the evidence in Gahanna-Jefferson public schools falls right in line with what we're seeing and hearing from the state and our local health officials. So the indicator that we set for school spread was, school spread district-wide that's at 25 or greater. And so in a second, we will take a look at kind of what our data points look like compared to these thresholds. The next one that we set was taking a look at the staff absence rate due to COVID. We wanted to be mindful of the number of staff members that are not able to be in our buildings because of COVID-related, situations. And, we took a look at some local school districts. Many school districts had set ranges for this type of indicator. We ended up going with greater than 5% staff absence rate related to COVID, and put in there that we would want to see that for 3 consecutive days before we would start to kind of, before we would schedule this conversation, or that way it would trigger us to have the conversation about a learning model change. In looking at the next data point, we also thought that student absent rate was really important for us to look at. We have many more students in our district than staff members. And so in taking a look at that percentage, we set that threshold at greater than 10% student absences related to COVID. And again, had that 3 consecutive days piece within that indicator. And the last piece that we were looking at is our substitute fill rate. And this has honestly been the data point that I think it is more of a pain point for us on some days, because when we have low substitute fill rates, and what that is when we have a staff member that is out of the building for either a COVID-related illness or some other reason, then we would enter into our absence management system to request a substitute to fill in for that teacher. And this year it has been increasingly more difficult for us to find substitutes to fill in for our staff when they're out. And so, as you can imagine, when we don't have substitutes, it can create, a bit of a scramble in the mornings to get classes covered, to find staff members that might be able to, take a class for this period. And so definitely substitute fill rates is something we felt was really important for just our operations within the district. And so we set that at substitute fill rates less than 75%. And it's for 5 consecutive days. And so, we definitely want to make sure that all of these align with our goal of keeping students in school and maintaining in-person learning as much as possible. And so, this was kind of, these were our initial thresholds that we, want to kind of use to gauge these conversations that might be needed. The next few slides actually show our data since we've been back after winter break. And so these first 2 charts do represent our COVID-related student absences. And I shared the threshold again. And then our staff-related absences, or our staff absences related to COVID, and our threshold. And so what you can see is with regard to the students, we have not had a day since we've been back in January that our student absence rate connected to COVID has even reached 4%. And so, that's something that we continue to monitor, and we run this data based off of our daily ADM, our daily attendance. These gaps in the data would be our weekends, where we obviously wouldn't have that data collected. And then if you take a look at our staff absences, now remember the threshold here for staff absence is slightly lower. And we had a period here the week of January 11th where those numbers, those percentages were kind of getting pretty high. But even at that, we have not passed the 5% threshold that we set. And then, we're starting to kind of see those numbers come back down here this week. And so that's good for us to see. And one of the things that, we believe could be impacting our most recent data are the close contact definition changes that have happened that Sue referenced. And we'll talk a little bit more about later in the presentation. So the next slide just shows this school spread evidence that Sue was referencing. And since January, they identified one positive case that they're saying is possibly related to school exposure. And of course, we never exactly know for certain, but so we're well below the threshold that's been set for that indicator. And then substitute wise, less than 75% is where we get into that concern area. And so we've had, several days where we've been above. We did have a period, and this actually aligns with that staff absence rate period that we had taken a look at that was getting close to 5%. We had a few days there where we were lower than 75%. And, it's not easy to manage on those days at all, but, we were able to kind of make it through. And, our teachers and our administrators are doing a fantastic job with their willingness to step up and help out. And then back into last week, we, started to see those percentages go back up. And then this is Monday's data. So at this point, based on the thresholds we've set for those conversation triggers related to a full distance learning return, we've not necessarily met those, and we haven't, as a task force, had to come together for those discussions. This next slide is just additional contributing factors that we wanted to make sure we're mindful of and pulling into these conversations. Certainly guidance from Franklin County Public Health. We also talked about the need here in this second bullet to make sure we're not just looking at school spread across the district, but also making sure, we might have some buildings that we need to be watching more closely. And so we would be looking for evidence of school spread in individual buildings. And then taking a look at, the impact of quarantines on operations and learning, feedback that we might receive, and then, of course, additional expert opinions from health officials. So I'm going to pause there. Any questions related to these conversation triggers, that might lead to a conversation about going back into full distance learning?
Hey, Joe, my question was, if someone was asymptomatic, how are they becoming part of the equation? If, say, they went to school, they attended throughout their hybrid sessions, and they never were, then they never stayed away through that period, and then they went through their normal period, and the virus cleared up. So how do you account for people that are asymptomatic if they don't get tested, or whether someone was in contact with this person?
Right.
One person showed signs and symptoms and one didn't.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of the tricky things, because, if they weren't symptomatic, then it would be hard for us to know unless there were a positive test. Sue, were you going to add in?
Yeah, there would be no way for us to know unless a positive test result was reported to us. And then we do actually look back at positive test results that did not have symptoms prior to, and we try to find how that student might have been exposed. And almost every time, the family is able to connect it to an outside exposure. And we do document that as well.
Yeah.
I think, just for the benefit of the rest of the committee, just to reiterate a little bit more, I think that the reason why creating a decision tree was such a big discussion for the task force, because it just feels like guidance is changing regularly with respect to the virus, from the CDC to ODH to Franklin County. And it's still so fluid. And so I think what's important for committee members tonight, but also for anybody that's watching, and I think we've got to make sure that, and I need to check the website, the microsite, Hinda, to make sure that we're communicating this, is that, these are triggers for conversation that may change full distance learning. They're not like when the whole color coded system came out and things were tied specifically to these colors. I think what everybody quickly realized is that doesn't make practical sense because there's so many variables. But I just think it's going to be so important to make sure that we're communicating with people so that, absent being a part of these types of conversations, does the average parent, average family really understand that these are just triggers for conversations to change, not necessarily change?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we've communicated that pretty extensively. Jill, I don't know if you agree. However, I think it's always going to be important to continue to reinforce that.
Yeah.
Well, and a tricky piece is, when sometimes when individuals see numbers, they just latch onto those numbers and not necessarily the text around it, or maybe the context that was provided. So I think just continuing to reiterate that conversation piece. Yeah.
I will say the county call this week was one of the most positive we've had. The numbers are down something like 22%. The positivity rate was like 16% last week. Now it's 12%. So things are looking good, but in some ways it's like chutes and ladders, like that game I used to play with my kids, because now we have the Brazilian, the British, and the South African variant that people are predicting that could, sort of a race to vaccinate people before those hit widely in the US. So I think the whole point of the thresholds that we looked at is to have a conversation as things change, as Jennifer said, because things are never, they really in a number of weeks, we're past the holidays, these are real numbers, there's no lag. And so it's exciting, and hopefully it'll hold, but it may change again. And so having, the ability to have that conversation and really kind of deliberate on what to do in terms of our learning model is really important. So I'm really grateful to all of you and the task force for your guidance and help.
I just want to say something really quickly. I want to say thank you to Sue and to our school nurses who have figured out a way to capture the information about the amazing job that we're doing in our school buildings as quickly as they have. I know how much work it takes to do that kind of right on time contact tracing. And when the task force last met, I know that we were talking about wanting to be able to do that, but recognizing how much work that might involve. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Mrs. Wigging and to the school nurses and to all of the district staff who figured out a way to take on that additional task. That information, I think, is so vital to us to be able to know how to make decisions and how to think about things. I mean, all of the information that we're getting at the national level, at the statewide level, at the county level, at the school district level, it's all interesting, and it's all things that we're all looking at all the time. But seeing in real time what's actually going on in our own buildings and how we're able to mitigate spread with the protocols that we have in place, I think is crucial information. So thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I think that's exactly right. And I just, to your point, Brill, I can't believe that this was a discussion of wouldn't it be nice in a task force meeting, not even a month ago. And then now we have this amazing data. I'm just blown away that that's the case. I also think that it's really hard. I think Sue and her team are in a really tough position because they've got to make not everything is just, it's not just one or the other. It's not A or B. I think there's some tough calls that need to be made in order to keep that data the way that it is. And so I think about examples where, personally, even recently in our house, we had one of our students quarantined for an exposure that we weren't even sure it was 11 minutes, right? And the time frame, 12 minutes, and the time frame is 15, right? And he had a mask on, but ate donuts a couple times, right? So I really do appreciate the work that happened between, us as parents and Sue's staff to kind of talk that out. And this district ended up erring on the side of caution, and he was quarantined, which is fine, because that was the decision, but it wasn't just black and white. It wasn't just one way or the other. And those are tough calls, but I think it's because of some of those tough calls that we are in the position we are, where we can show that we're not spreading within the schools, in addition to our other protocols that we have in place. So, and I think that's evolved, right, since the summer, and we were still trying to figure out who was quarantined and not. And it's really just evolved in a matter of 6 months to become so expert in this, which is maybe not the thing anybody hoped to be an expert in.
Yeah, and to your point, Jennifer, I'm so impressed with Sue, her team, and our nurses, and how much they've learned. I mean, we have learned so much that we didn't know before, and it's giving us the ability to be safer and to make decisions. Because when this all started, it was really, really hard to know what the right thing to do was, and we were talk with the county constantly, but now we do this contact tracing with really very little right to conversation with the county, because we've been trained to do it, right?
Yeah, I would say that the amount of calibration and consistency in decision making that the nurses are doing on a daily basis with each other is, I think, what's allowing us to make decisions that are just not a singular, silo decision. And we were talking to the county probably 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day to support our decisions, and we're probably down to less than once a day in many cases. So we still talk to them regularly. They still know definitely who we are, but we feel very confident in our decisions. And if there is ever a question, Jennifer, you are correct. We do err on the side of caution, although they are being very creative in ways to confirm or deny it, including taking their time and doing due diligence, such as watching videos and interviewing extra people and calibrating the start and end times of classes and bus routes. And it is amazing the work that they're putting into this to try to keep everyone in school as often as possible, but not having students in school that may potentially pass the virus to a staff member or to another student.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this next slide highlights some triggers that we discussed as a task force that would, initiate conversation about a change to full in-person learning. And so these particular triggers don't necessarily have specific thresholds set, but they are things that we want to be continuing to talk about and look at. So recommendations from Franklin County Public Health or the Ohio Department of Health. Reductions in the social distancing requirements, which we know is, part of kind of what, dictates the number of students we're going to have in our classrooms, which then, kind of aligns us to hybrid at this time. Certainly no evidence of school spread. And then vaccine distribution was another important factor that we wanted to consider. So talking a little bit more about the vaccine piece, we did recently receive more information about the 1B group getting started next week, and we are excited about that. We communicated with staff yesterday, again today, after talking with the union president, and then we're also able to communicate with families this evening. All GJPS staff are eligible to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. We do have some staff members. Sue worked really hard to help us identify a large list of staff members that were able to receive the vaccine as a part of the 1A group. So many have already gotten their first dose. Starting next week, anyone that hasn't gotten their first dose, and those included just in 1B, will be able to receive the Pfizer vaccine next week. we've partnered with Kroger. Maybe you've seen that just kind of in the news. We are very grateful that school employees have been put at the top of that priority list to be able to get that vaccine. The first doses will happen next week. We're not exactly sure what the scheduling process for the second dose will look like. We're anticipating a registration link for staff that we'll be able to send out as soon as we have it. Hopefully it will be tomorrow. And then there's some talk about second dose scheduling happening while they're at the site for their first dose, but we're not exactly sure if that's going to play out. But we do know the second dose will happen the week of February 23rd through the 27th. There are 2 sites for our staff members to sign up to receive the vaccine through. And, we sent out additional information essentially to our staff, but we want to encourage this. It's certainly a choice for our staff members. We did do, after talking as a task force, we did do a survey with our teachers just to gauge the intent of our staff with relation to receiving the COVID vaccine. We had just under 400 staff members complete the survey, and almost 95% of them said that they do intend to receive the vaccine. So that was, very good for us to hear. Of the 14 staff members that said that they do not intend to receive the vaccine, it was a recommendation from the task force for us to try and dig in a little deeper to understand why they might not be choosing to get that. And so of the 14 people that chose that, 50% of them said they just don't feel like they know enough about the COVID-19 virus. They the vaccine for COVID-19. This gets cut off a little bit because it's a live site that I screenshotted the image from. The next one was, I do not wish to receive the Moderna vaccine. So at the time of this survey, it was right when we had gotten the information about our 1A group and they were getting the Moderna vaccine. So now, of course, we know that 1B is getting Pfizer. So, that may have changed the survey results a little bit. There were 6 of the 14 that said they do not participate in vaccines. 9 were concerned about the long-term effects of the vaccine, and 7 were concerned about the short-term or the immediate side effects of the vaccine. So that was just some helpful data. We were able to get some information out to our school staff about the Pfizer vaccine today to help them to educate themselves about that option. So the next, so actually I want to pause there. I know, full return is something that is, certainly what we are all aiming for. And, we want to kind of get through this vaccine period and be able to kind of pulse check on the new information we have from the health department. Steve, do you have anything that you want to add related to that piece?
So, yeah, we're going to monitor the situation. Both Dr. Roberts from Columbus Public Health and Joe Mazzola were on our call Tuesday. They said it's too early to tell, even with the vaccines that'll be happening for districts, all over our county. So Franklin County has been made a priority. We had some meetings with individuals from the governor's office. And so we'll be going to, between the 2nd and the 6th next week, our staff, teachers and staff will be able to get the vaccine. They said, the public health officials so far have said it's too early to tell whether or not we can consider full return as a recommendation from them. They still think it's important to have social distancing. They still think masks and mitigation strategies, hand hygiene are very important. They're concerned about the variant, viruses, the mutations that are out there. So we're going to monitor the situation. I think, we will be talking with them every Tuesday morning about that. I know we're definitely interested if it's safe and it's a recommendation from public health to going back full time. We think it's best for everyone, but we have to kind of make sure it's safe and what the recommendations are from public health officials.
Hey, Steve and Jill, And Sue, do you think maybe the task force, something to add to that discussion is maybe starting to have Scott Lofton look at some analytics? I mean, I know early on some of the challenges that we faced with respect to the distancing rules were that there's just not enough space in a lot of the buildings to have 6 feet. But can we start to do that analysis and then discuss it at the task force to see like how many feet we can get, and still distance? So can we get to 3? Can we get to, so that we can kind of understand a little bit more about our space and kind of the sliding scale, and see if we need to find, additional spaces within our buildings, or just, to start to proactively prepare for the possibility that those distancing requirements could change and how we would be able to respond as a district.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We actually, in our admin meeting tomorrow, are going to have some preliminary conversations about those pieces, because certainly, class sizes play into that as well. We've got the physical space and how much that can accommodate, but then taking a look at class sizes as well. So I think that's a great recommendation for us to start bringing that in to the discussion. Okay, and I think the last slide we're going to take a look at today, the last time we were together as a task force, we knew that guidance was coming, and we were working on getting, a clear picture of what the new guidance from the health departments related to close contact identification and quarantine was going to look like. And since our last task force meeting, we got that guidance out, we communicated with families, and we've been, working to navigate this new information. So I asked Sue Wigging, I thought it would be good for us to just kind of have, a verbal explanation of what these new guidelines look like.
Sure. So it only has changed actually for K-12. Our preschool close contact tracing has stayed the same, which is probably familiar to everybody. So a close contact in our preschool program is anyone who was with or without a mask within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. And so they are considered a close contact to a positive case. In our K-12 classrooms, which extends to transportation, like hallways, those other areas that are sometimes common, including lunch with a stipulation, it is a close contact is anyone who is 6 feet or 6 feet or more to an infected person for at least 15 minutes without proper masking. So if they had a mask on and they were all wearing it properly, not just the individual who was positive or just not the individual who was exposed, but everyone was wearing the mask properly, they aren't considered a close contact. If they were not wearing their mask properly, though, they are considered a close contact. And so that's what's getting a little bit tricky because we are counting on our teaching staff, our support staff, sometimes even our bus drivers to give us a little bit of information about the length, the distance, and if kids and staff were wearing their mask properly or not, which we're defining as over their nose and mouth for the entire duration of the 15 minutes. And then the close contact tracing did not change for sports or extracurricular activities. So anything outside of what's considered a school building or school environment still, again, is considered needing to quarantine if they were in the same space as an infected individual for any length of time. When thinking about the lunch periods in our schools, as long as the students or staff were at least 6 feet apart while they were eating without a mask, we do not need to consider them a close contact. If they were closer than 6 feet, regardless of if they were eating or not eating, because some kids go there and they say, well, I didn't eat lunch that day. It would not matter. During lunchtime, when any of those individuals have their mask off to eat, they would be considered a close contact if it's closer than 6 feet.
So
mind shift. It's a big mind shift from what we were practicing for so long.
It is a mind shift. especially when preschool is still operating under what the whole district used to operate under, and it's just K-12 now and that proper mask wearing piece. I think certainly, and we've talked about it in task force, we've talked about it on this committee and with the board, we definitely have some really strong safety practices in place. Our teachers and our students are doing a phenomenal job. And so because of those safety practices that are in place, those are really considered very controlled environments. And so, that's kind of, I think the thinking is, let's keep kids in as much as we can into school where we know there are these controlled environments and we have low school spread. But, if there is an exposure in school, that would not mean that students, would be able to continue with their extracurriculars. They would still be quarantined in that setting because it is not a controlled setting. It does not have the mask wearing. We cannot ensure that social distancing piece. So, I think there's, it's like you said, Sue, it's definitely a mind shift. But the more we get into it, we learn it better and better.
I don't know what I just did. I think the other challenge is that we continue to quarantine students who had a close contact to a positive case outside of school in the same way we always have.
Right.
And so that is a shift also in understanding that in school, if you're a close contact and proper mask wearing was maintained, you can come to school, even though you can't do anything else outside of school. But you can't do that if you're a close contact outside of school. It's very confusing.
Yeah, I think that's the most confusing part to people. And I mean, that's the guidance. It is what it is. It's not, they're not our rules. They're the rules that have been given to us. But I think that is the piece right there that I think is most confusing and hard to understand. And if even each time I think I have it, I'm just like, oh, wait, I just explained it wrong. Because it's almost counterintuitive in some ways, but I understand they're trying to give a little bit of flexibility, but it sort of muddies the waters a little bit when people are trying to make sense of it. And then I guess my public service announcement is just don't eat donuts within 6 feet of people. See, that's what happened in my house.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to think about a rationale in my head for how to keep order, they just gave us a little bit of cushion when you're a close contact in the school, and the cushion wasn't granted anything outside of school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the point Jill made earlier, Sue, is the most important one. The way the public health officials explain it is classroom is a very controlled, monitored, socially distanced, mask-wearing environment, and others aren't. And so it's so hard for people to understand. And we appreciate everyone's patience as we make this change. We think it'll enable us to, have, the ability to have school and hybrid, not need so many subs. I think that's important, but we understand the frustration if you're, exposed in a classroom, but not a close contact, and then you can't play basketball. It's very hard to understand. It's very frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just to piggyback one more thing on that, I think the positive news is that we have seen a handful of kids be able to stay in school under this new practice. And so we are tracking that as well. Believe it or not, we are saying, okay, if we weren't following this algorithm, how many kids would be out that are able to stay now? And so this week, we just started that actually, and we are seeing a small handful of kids that previous to this algorithm would have been sent home for quarantine and now are able to stay in the school setting. So that's a positive outcome given our numbers.
So I think that's a good segue. This is just the last kind of data slide, and the bars are a little tiny, but this kind of shows the blue bar is that quarantine, are those quarantine numbers since we've been back in January. And you can see, we are starting to come back down here, and we would expect that to, hopefully continue to decrease with these new definitions. So just that look of our data from January. I do have a slide that shows October through January. but it's really tiny to see. But it kind of you can kind of see the ebb and flow.
Hey, Jill, have we tracked with the state data? I mean, and I'm not asking you to tell me, number for number. It was more just a question of curiosity about, whether we've seen sort of comparable tracking.
So I would say kind of our best way to gauge that is looking at the CATS data each week. But even that isn't necessarily as specifically drilled down as what, we are getting on our day-to-day tracking. But that data, it actually kind of, there are definitely some districts that have remained in the higher tiers of, positive cases. But it is interesting to watch that data kind of change across the districts. So I think that's kind of our best pulse check, but not a specific comparison, Hinda.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Perry on our task force, he shakes his head every time we talk about the CATS data. So I think there's definitely some challenges with that data just as a comparison, a basis for comparison at all, which is, I guess, another reason why this is really a big deal that we're tracking this in real time, because this is the best data that we could ever hope to have in order to make good decisions. And so it's just all the more reason why it's just such a wonderful thing that we're able to do this.
Okay, any other questions or comments from any task force members? Okay.
All right, any board members, any questions? Okay, so I guess procedurally, we'll just close this meeting, right? And then go into the special meeting?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead. If either you can explain or I can explain, either way, but yes.
Okay. So we do, I'll give it a try, right? So we do have a special meeting scheduled after this meeting. You're more than welcome to join us. We will, but this meeting will end and then we'll go into that special meeting, which I think is then a motion to go into executive session. Is that right? No, that is actually a special meeting where we will be taking action. So if you would like to participate in that special meeting, you do need to leave this meeting and then access the special meeting via the separate link that has been posted on the website. Go ahead and add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I'll wait till you adjourn.
Okay. So if no other board members have any questions, staff or task force members, then I will go ahead, and it is, I don't know what time it is. 7:28. Oh, wow. We were timely tonight. And I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then,
Thanks,
Burl, I want to add, I don't think that there's a separate link.
So it's the
Right.
same-
I think what she means is instead of being here in the Zoom with us, if there's anybody who wants to watch the special board meeting, they can watch through the YouTube live link.
Right.
I think that's what she meant.
Yeah, and I think we're going to stay on this YouTube live link that we're already on. Is that right, Matt?
We're staying on this Zoom and this YouTube live. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any
Yeah,
That's
that's
not
right.
what I said. I'm sorry. I messed that up. So I thought there was a separate link for the other meeting. I almost left, so I'm glad we talked
don't
about it.
leave. Anybody who intends to stay here with us for this special board meeting can just stay right here. You don't have to exit the Zoom. You don't have to do anything else. If you would like, if you're not a board member and you're not district administration or any of the other people who we need to participate in this special board meeting, we would love for you to watch the board meeting. There is a YouTube live link for that. We're going to be having a public conversation about the process for procuring an architect and a construction manager at risk. And then there is some board action that is part of this special board meeting. And before I give too much explanation, I think let's get the meeting started, and then I can kind of explain what we're going to do in the meeting. But what I would say is Yeah, Sue, you are more than welcome to stay or go. You are more than welcome to go. It's been a long day, I'm sure. I just didn't want anyone to feel obligated to stay here. It is now 7:30 p.m. And we are going to officially call the meeting to order. So Mr. Verlingo, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Ms. Chrysler,
Here.
Mr. Hairston,
Here.
Mr. Hairston,
Here.
okay. Ms. Moore,
Here.
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Here. So if you are watching along or watching this later, the purpose of this special board meeting, like I said, is first we're going to have a public discussion about the process of hiring both an architect and a construction manager at risk. After we have that conversation, there is one item for board action. But for the discussion part, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Barrett. You can kind of turn it over to and introduce our guests who are going to kind of walk us through the process and give us opportunity to ask questions.
Yes, thanks very much. We're excited to talk about hiring the professionals that are going to help us through phase 2 of our master facilities plan. And so we have Chris McCloskey, Amy Rydell, and I'm not sure, is Casey here tonight? Chris?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, I didn't see it. And Casey Cross from Bricker and Eckler. They're going to talk about what a school district needs to do when they pass a bond issue, they are ready to start a building project, and how we need to go about procuring an architect and a construction manager at risk. And they'll talk about a couple other things. So we're excited to get started with this project, and we just want our board and our community to be informed of the process. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chris McCloskey, Amy, and Casey. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate the opportunity to come give you an update of all of the good things that we've been doing with the district administration to get all of the professionals on board for the project so that we can move it forward. So the first thing that we'll be chatting about is just a little bit of project background information. Then we'll pivot into the architect procurement process and where we are in the procurement process. Talk a little bit about the CMR process and where we are in that process. And when we say CMR, what we are referring to there is the construction manager at risk. That's the delivery model that the board has selected to deliver the project. It is one of the new delivery models that is available to public owners in Ohio. I guess it's not new, it's been around since 2012, but it's one of the newer ways that a board can deliver a project, and it's the way that the elementary project was delivered. So the board is familiar with that process, but we'll refer to that entity as a CMR, construction manager at risk. And then we'll touch on the owner's representative role for the project in a little bit of detail later on in this presentation. So with that, Amy, I'll let you go ahead and just provide a little bit of project background.
Yeah, so this slide shows it's a reminder of the project and the timeline. We have the total project with an estimated cost of $250 million. And inside that total project, you have the high school with an estimated cost of $190 million, a 18-month design phase, and a 24-month construction phase with an open date of fall 2024. Also inside that total project, you have 3 middle schools for additions and renovations for a cost of $31 million with a 12-month design phase and an 18-month construction phase. These middle schools would have an open date of fall 2023. You also have 2 elementary schools for additions and renovations for a total cost of $20 million. And it will follow, the elementary schools follow the same schedule as those middle schools do.
So as you can see, there's going to be quite a bit going on with the project. You're going to have 6 buildings in various stages of design and construction, all simultaneously occurring at the same time, so that you can achieve those open dates in fall of 2023 and fall of 2024 for the high school. And so one of the questions that we get periodically is, in a project of this size, why would you just select one architect of record and not multiple architects of record for each individual building? And there are a few reasons that we are really thinking about and wanting to have one architect of record. And those are listed there. We'll get into those in a little bit more detail. But the first one is your project is on a relatively tight time frame. I mean, it's certainly a workable time frame, but it's aggressive, and there are a few reasons for that. It's nice to have a single point of contact with the architect of record. It's even nicer to have a single point of responsibility for your architect of record. And then your high school brings a little bit of a different flavor just due to the size of that project to your overall building project. And so you can take advantage of that. And so, getting into the issue of the time frame, the buildings need to run simultaneously due to the federal tax spending obligations for the bond proceeds. And that's in order to maintain the tax exempt status of those bonds. And so in the first year, you need to spend 10% of the funds. In the second year, 30%. In the third year, or by the third year, 60%. And then by the fifth year, you need to have spent 85% of the bond proceeds. And the architect of record needs to sign a letter to that effect for the tax due diligence process, basically representing to the IRS that the building funds will be spent. There's a reasonable expectation that the funds will be spent within 5 years. And so it's nice to have that conversation and get that information and essentially that letter from your main architect of record. And then let's talk a little bit about the single point of contact. It really results in a cohesive team working with the district to develop the project. Certainly there's going to be more than one member of the architect's team that is going to be involved in the project. There's going to be multiple members of the team. But having that single firm is really what creates that cohesive team environment. And it really avoids the need to coordinate district administration time with multiple architect firms. Your district administrators are certainly still going to need to continue to conduct the business of the district while this project is going on. And so having that process with the architect as streamlined as possible is really the best approach. And then when we talk about having a single point of responsibility for the architect, less problematic for simultaneous construction projects to be able to just pick up the phone and call the lead individual for your architect if you've got a problem, and then allow that individual to sprinkle it out downstream if need be. And again, that kind of speaks to that second bullet point there. It's just if a problem arises, you've got one individual to pick up the phone and call. And we don't want to think about problems, but it's a large building project, and it's nice to be able to just have that line of communication. And then the third one, it certainly facilitates coordination with the local building authority. There are going to be a lot of submissions moving to the building authority at the same time, and having a coordinated approach with the building authority is certainly going to smooth the process out, and the building authority will certainly appreciate that as well. And then the last thing I wanted to chat about is the high school. It's a very large project, and candidly, it's a draw for large national firms that have the bandwidth for this size of project and scope of project to bring that cutting edge design to all of the phase 2 buildings, including the elementaries and the middle schools. You've got some great firms that are in the mix here, and they're national firms. So the high school brings them to the table, and it's nice to have that. And so having one of those individuals is going to be great for the project. So Amy, I'll have you talk a little bit about how that selection process works.
Okay, so we know why one, and this is the selection that we went through to get there, or the district and the evaluation committee went through to get there. It's a qualifications-based selection process. The district published the request for qualifications, and then the evaluation committee reviewed those statements of qualifications that were submitted by the architect firms, and then the evaluation committee shortlisted 3 firms. Those 3 firms were interviewed, and now the evaluation committee is ready to make a recommendation to the board. This just shows a timeline of what the evaluation committee went through from election day to publishing the request for qualifications, meeting to select the shortlist, interviewing, asking the architects to submit more answers to their questions, and then all the way up to the final evaluation committee meeting. And you'll see between the architect interviews and the final evaluation committee meeting, I tried to put in all of our meetings, but there were so many that the evaluation committee did a really good job of discussing the references and the qualifications and vetting all of the shortlisted firms up until that last evaluation committee meeting. This was the evaluation committee members. You had district representatives and 2 parent representatives in Chris Grykar and Catherine Hope Cunningham. And this list shows the responding firms. So above the line, you'll see the shortlisted architect firms. Those are the firms that the evaluation committee chose to shortlist and interview. And then the firms below the line are the firms that the evaluation committee chose not to interview, and they were not shortlisted. And Chris will talk in more detail about those shortlisted firms.
Yeah, just to echo what Amy said about the evaluation committee and the work that they've done. I mean, it was a very involved process, and the committee spent a lot of time poring over the submissions, the statements of qualifications from each of the firms, and did a really nice job of vetting all of the issues and making their determination. And so, as Amy indicated, we got a number of great submissions from architects, which didn't surprise me. It's a very large project and a very strong district. And, we knew we would get a lot of interest in the project, and we did get that. And the 3 firms and the customary step is to shortlist firms for interviews. And so the 3 firms that the evaluation committee shortlisted were DLR Group and Shore Architects. DLR Group is a Omaha firm. It is headquartered in Omaha. They've got an international presence, and they do have an office in Columbus here. And the international presence for DLR is really something that that they spoke a lot about during the interview process. And we, or the evaluation committee, I should say, certainly did a great job of talking to folks that they have designed and built schools for, to get a handle on what it is that DLR could bring to the table. Shore Architects is a local firm with an office in Dublin. Tony Shore has been practicing architecture for quite some time. And our firm has a tremendous amount of experience with Tony on other projects, and so he's certainly been a local player and architect in the field for a good long while. Moody Nolan similarly has is a national firm with offices in Columbus. Moody Nolan, as you may recall, is the firm that did some work for the district earlier on in the project. And then Triad is another strong local firm with offices in Columbus. And then Design Group is another firm that was shortlisted with they've got offices in Columbus and Pittsburgh. And then they partnered with Perkins Will, that is another national firm headquartered in Chicago with an international presence. They don't have a local office, but they have done some significant work in Ohio. They did the work on the Upper Arlington City Schools project, and then also the Grandview project. So they certainly have a presence here in Columbus with the work that they've performed in and around your district. So after going through all 3 of those folks in grave detail, the evaluation committee has a recommendation, and the recommendation for the board from the evaluation committee is DLR Group with Tony Shore. Again, DLR is a large national firm with a deep bench for the design phase, and Tony Shore leads a local firm with a great deal of construction administration experience that will certainly benefit the very large high school project. And so after pouring through the various documents and submissions from each of these firms, the evaluation committee has determined that this is the firm that they are recommending for the district's building project. So that's very exciting. And DLR is a great firm, and Shore, Tony Shore is as well. One of the things that DLR brings to the table, I think that was certainly something that the evaluation committee had a lot of appreciation for, is a process that they refer to as the BOLD process. And it involves bridging organization, learning, and design. And they've got a phrase in their material, and the evaluation committee certainly vetted this out, but they refer to it as behavior commissioning. And so they work with the students and they work with the staff to help both understand how to best utilize the new facility, so that you're not in a situation where they design and you construct a new facility and then they move off into the sunset and you don't have any idea how to use your new facility. They, through their BOLD process, they ensure that you're going to be educated along with your students as to how to best utilize these new facilities. So it's a really exciting process. And Steve, I don't know if you want to wade in a little bit on DLR for the board.
Yeah, so, we sent the document that, describes the organizational behavior approach to their design team. And so what our evaluation committee was excited about is the process of designing a new building is really also a process of redesigning learning. And so the BOLD building organizational learning design is really an approach that excited us because there's going to be a lot of listening to teachers and hearing from them about what they would like to see, but there's also going to be a lot of education about modern design. I mean, one of the things we don't want to do is build a high school, like a 1950s high school in the 20th century or the 21st century. So it's really, really important that we all learn together and our organization grows, in particular with the high school, which is the biggest part of this project. So we checked references and, throughout the country, and we learned that this process really does lead to significant change and engagement and, inspired learning. So that was one of the key factors in selecting DLR and SHORE. Also, the community engagement was another key factor. We want community members, parents, teachers, staff, students to be a part of this process and want to hear from them. And we want our design professionals to show them what could be. It'll be a really aspirational approach to design. So those are the two main things that we're excited about, in addition to all the things that Chris and Amy talked about. It's a very large firm. They have a very deep bench. And when they do this organizational behavior design approach, they bring a lot of people to the table for that engagement. And their communication strategies are also very strong. So thanks.
Yep. So that's going to be the recommendation from your evaluation committee, made up of your administrators and a couple community members, a couple parents as well. And so that will be a motion for you to consider and pass on tonight as to whether or not to accept the evaluation committee's recommendation with regard to DLR. So that'll be coming up here shortly. And I will have Casey continue on just to give you an update as to where we are in the Cmr procurement timeline.
Actually, before you do that, can we take a quick pause
Yep.
and see if board members have any questions about either the process or the recommendation about the architect of record? And I can't see everybody, so if any board members have questions either about the process that the evaluation committee used. I know that we've all now had an opportunity to actually see the RFQ, see all of the submittals. So if any board members have any questions at all about the process or about the recommendation itself, let's do that now, and then we can move on and talk about the CMR process.
I think it would be, this is Daphne Morin. I think it would be important to share that there were teachers involved on that committee as well.
Yeah, I know there was a slide. It went quickly that.
Well, high school teacher Ray Adams was involved, and Jessica Williams, principal of our high school, was involved in the committee. The true teacher engagement will come with the BOLD process. But yeah, they were very helpful in part of this. Also, Catherine Hope Cunningham is a parent of a middle schooler, and she was also a former teacher. So.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say that I appreciate having the opportunity and the time to get to look through the actual RFQ and to look through all of the submittals. It was it's one thing to talk about it, and I appreciate very much all of the time that the committee put into this, not just reading the documents, but actually interviewing the firms. For me personally, it was really helpful to actually read and see the documents. I don't know what kind of learning that is, but I need to actually have a physical document to read. So it was helpful to see those submittals in conjunction with hearing the recommendations. So I appreciate that. I know, I mean, each of the for anyone who's wondering, each of the submittals themselves were hundreds of pages. So I appreciate the work of the evaluation committee, not just in reading through all those documents, but then there were some follow-up questions that got asked of some of the finalist firms, and all of the reference checking that went on, and the interview process itself. So thank you to the evaluation committee for putting in all that time.
Thank you.
Any questions before we move on to CMR? Okay.
First slide in our CMR process, you'll see the CMR Procurement Timeline that the evaluation committee has been through. So you'll see the construction manager at risk, the request for qualifications was published. And there's a bit of a gap there, and that's because the Ohio Revised Code requires that RFQ be published for 30 days. Those statements of qualifications from the CMR firms were received, and the evaluation committee met to shortlist the CMR firms. There was a request for proposals that was issued to those shortlisted CMR firms. And actually today we had the pre-proposal meeting with the shortlisted CMR firms. The proposals will be due back to the district on February 3rd, and the evaluation committee will conduct interviews with the shortlisted CMR firms on February 8th. The CMR procurement process and selection process is a two-step process. So the first step is the CMR request for qualifications, or the RFQ. For the RFQ for this project, 7 firms submitted their statements of qualifications, and 6 firms were selected by the evaluation committee to move on to the second stage. The second stage is the request for proposals, or RFP, and the 6 firms will submit proposals, and those 6 firms will also interview. The evaluation committee will review and consider each pricing and technical proposal that is included in response to the RFP, and the CMR firms will be ranked for best value. So best value is where price is a factor, but it's not necessarily the deciding factor in selecting the CMR firm or making the recommendation to select the CMR firm. This slide shows the 6 shortlisted CMR firms, and those are Gilbane, Turner, Russilli, Smoot, Robertson, and Cornica Cosing partnering with Elford.
And Amy, let me just pause there on that slide for a minute. You know, much like the submissions that you received for your architect of record, again, you have an incredibly stout group of construction managers that are interested in your project. I mean, really, this is an all-star team of construction managers to select from. And so I think that, again, just reflects the greatness that this project is going to be, and what these folks want to be a part of, what they want to have their name on, and so it's a great lineup. So the evaluation committee will certainly have its hands full to go through that, but it's a good problem to have for sure.
So we have 3 different CMR selection options. One is to use 1 CMR firm for the total project. Another is to use 2 CMR firms, one for the high school and then one for the elementary and middle schools combined. And then the last is to use 3 CMR firms, 1 firm for the high school, 1 firm for the middle school, and then 1 firm for the elementary schools. And this is still, the option that we go with is still going to be decided after we receive the proposals back from the CMR firms.
And so, this is really a pivotal, critical decision to make. And there are different factors that go into this determination as to whether or not to move forward with 1, 2, or 3 CMR firms. It's a little bit different than the architect of record, because, you know, obviously the construction managers are going to be putting in a significant amount of work. And so there are issues of risk that go into having, you know, just one out there. And there are issues of risk that go into having multiple firms out there, and that you've got, you know, folks, you know, a number of firms that are out there at the same time. And so what we're going to do through this process, and what the evaluation committee is going to do through the process, is receive, and the way that it's been teed up for the CMRs at this point in time is, let us know what you think the benefits are that you can bring to the project if you are a solo, part of a team, or part of 3. And if you're, you know, part of 3, which one do you want? Now, we suspect that the majority of them are going to come in and say, well, we'd like to have the high school project. But what we will do is we'll learn through the process what they can bring to the table. We'll learn, the evaluation committee will learn about the way that they are thinking about delivering the project. And so as this process unfolds, we'll be able to come back to the board with a little bit tighter of a recommendation as to how we think the board should proceed 1, 2, or 3, and why that is. And so we'll let this process unfold a little bit, and then we'll come back to you with a little bit more information at a later date. And I don't know, Steve, if you wanted to add anything in there on that.
No, I think you covered it. I think, you know, going through the process once again with a good evaluation committee, and looking at the options, and using your counsel about, you know, how many is appropriate. These are, you know, this is a very large project, phase 2. So making the right choice is going to be really important.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, you know, again, you've got a great lineup of CMR firms to select from. So we are certain we'll get a lot of good information through this evaluation process to bring back to you. More reading.
Can you remind us again, when is it that anyone anticipates having a recommendation on CMR? What's the time?
Amy, I'll let you just go back to your prior slide on that. So the CMR, go ahead, Amy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's fine. The CMR interviews will be on February 8th, and those are all day. It takes all day to interview the 6 CMR firms. And the interviews will end at 4, and currently the evaluation committee is planning on meeting after the interviews are complete. And if the evaluation committee, if it follows the same trajectory as the architect committee, it may take us a few days and a few meetings to follow up on the references and the interviews. So I think that a good goal would be that 3rd week of February, but we're going to try and push it and meet as much as we need to make those recommendations to the board. I think those were all of our slides on construction manager at risk, if there are any other questions.
And we've got just a few slides on the owner's rep role as well. But, you know, as we did with the architect, we can pause here and talk a little bit about CMR if we'd like to.
So I know that, I mean, we have, as a district, we used a CMR for the building of Lincoln Elementary, but I guess for the benefit of our community who might not have any understanding, is there maybe just like a digestible explanation that would be helpful for the community to kind of understand the role that the CMR plays in the process?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So prior to, and you know, this is going to sound a bit like a history lesson, but I'll get to the punchline here shortly. Prior to 2012, all projects in Ohio had to be delivered through what is referred to as a multiple prime delivery model. And, you know, most of those projects were problematic from the perspective of the owner had a number of different contracts, sometimes as many as 20 on a project of the size of the high school, maybe even 30 separate contractors out there that it's trying to manage and get all of those folks to play well in the sandbox with each other. The statutory creature that was created to help manage that process is referred to as a construction manager agent. And so on every project, an owner would hire an architect and then a construction manager agent, and then throw the project out to the low bid environment, and then drag back 20 individual, companies that they'd have to marshal along to get the project done. And so, and I guess I'll give credit where credit is due. Ohio State came in and said, we've had all of our fun, we've had all of our enough fun here with the multiple prime delivery model. We need something better. Other states do it differently. Why can't we? And so they came up with new delivery models. One of them was general contracting. One of them was design build. And then one of them was construction manager at risk. And construction manager at risk really surfaced as the darling of the bunch, because you can bring your construction manager on during the design process to help the architect get the project together, get it sequenced, understand phasing, figure out how all the pieces and parts are going to move together. And then as you move forward and you get the design process or the design documents complete, which is referred to as the construction document phase, when you get that complete, you put the project out for what is referred to as a guaranteed maximum price proposal to that CMR. That CMR will then give you its total price for the project. And then here's the best part of it. The CMR will then take responsibility for all of those subcontractors downstream. So you as an owner get the benefit of having a construction manager from start to finish. And then the construction manager has responsibility for all of the subcontractors and material suppliers for the project. So as I said, it's really grown into be the darling of the delivery models for public projects in Ohio.
Yeah, and maybe I would just add, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I personally think the benefit in a CMR model is that, and especially when you bring them on at the right time, I think if you don't bring them on early enough, then my point might be a little bit moot or might be a little bit lost. But when you bring them on at the time that you're hiring the architect and you're having them go through that design process with you, there's recommendations that they can make during that discovery phase, like when we're imagining what these spaces will look like and the architect's walking through public engagement, they can be taking a look at it. And maybe it's I'm trying to think of an example, like divided light windows, right? And so you might have this idea that everybody wants divided light windows in the building, and then they can price them out based on those conversations and go back to the architect and say, okay, this is going to be cost X, but you can have the same design and style for cost Y if you go in this direction. And so I think what they're able to do is actually, like, oftentimes what will happen is you'll design a project and you'll put it out to bid, and the next thing you know, the bids come back and you're either X% overbid, and then now you've got to either figure out how to cut costs from the projects. You might have to rebid, you might have to redesign. This is really kind of an iterative process, and it's taking what the public and what the inputs are that are coming into the architect and working real time to make sure that makes sense with the budget, and also they're part of the design process itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, exactly. That's perfectly said. Constructability reviews and estimating are two of the main benefits that a CMR brings to the table. Constructability reviews are, when they walk into the room and they say to the architect, you just designed a table with no legs. Now we need to install some legs. That's kind of a facetious thing to say, but that's the kind of thing that they can do with the constructability review, and to help the architect. And DLR would never design a table with no legs, by the way. But that's what they can do on the constructability front. And then on the estimating front, yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. The design will unfold in phases, and so you will go through schematic design, design development, and then construction documents. You will have a very hard stop at the schematic design phase, and then again at the design development phase with estimating. And so you'll hit a hard stop, and the architect will say, okay, school board, here's where we are with the schematic design. Does this look good to you? And give you an opportunity to buy in on it. And then at the same time, your construction manager will come in and say, okay, here's where you are with the estimate. It looks like you are ahead of budget, behind budget, on budget. And then you'll have another opportunity to do that again at the design development phase, and the construction manager will help you do that as well. And the thing that's great about it in the CMR world is the CMR is going to be the one who's providing you that guaranteed maximum price. So they really have a tight invested interest in making sure that the estimates are good as you move through the process so that you stay on budget, which is really one of your obviously critical concerns.
Yeah, and I don't know at what point, I know we didn't bring the CMR in for Lincoln Elementary at the same time that we were going through the public process. I don't know what that difference was. I mean, I think that's, in my opinion, one of the lessons learned from Lincoln. I mean, I think we have it's going to be a beautiful building. And I think between Triad and Corna, you know, the delivery of that product is absolutely exceptional, but we were behind schedule, right? I mean, let's not, you know, we made certain, you know, we were hoping to be on a faster track. And I think we didn't bring the CMR on until several months into the process. And I think once we did, that's when things started to really kind of align with the project itself. So I think that is one of the lessons learned from that experience, and then maybe helps us to be on a better track for these projects.
Yeah, I would say, Jennifer, we actually did bring them in fairly soon. I think, but you're exactly right. We learned a lot of lessons, and I think we were a little lofty in our design, and Cornica Cosing did exactly what you suggested. It helped us kind of reel us in a little bit, and then have a design that was more within the cost structure of the project. And so, yeah, I think the way you described it was perfect. Maybe we brought them in a little bit late, but I think at the end of the day, you're right. We learned a ton from that relationship, because so much of this design world is about listening, and having the builder be there for those listening sessions gives them a lot. And then they can also, you know, do exactly what you said, give you options and let you know what the cost will be for the discussions you're having, you know, and the aspirations you create. So.
Anybody else have any questions about the CMR selection process, the recommendation? Well, we don't have a recommendation yet, but about the process at all, or? Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on to chat a little bit about the owner's representative role. And so, you know, I think the first thing right out of the gate is, you know, what is an owner's representative? The owner's representative is really the eyes and ears advising the owner on any issues that arise during the project. And so it's just a separate entity that really has the district's best interest in mind. You know, if we go back to the conversation that we were talking about a little while ago with the construction manager agent, where that construction manager is an agent of the owner. This owner's rep role has really come into prominence since the law changed and the delivery models available to public owners changed. It didn't exist. I mean, it did exist, but it wasn't as well used and well known. But now that we've got these delivery models where you've got single points of responsibility and a general contractor and a construction manager at risk and then a design builder, there's still the need to have that entity on the project that's got the owner's best interest at heart, and especially on a project of this size. Now, for the Lincoln Elementary project, you certainly have a strong group of administrators that didn't need an owner's rep on that size of a project because you were able to staff it in-house. But on a project of this size, there's going to be a significant amount of additional work that is going to go in. And so an owner's representative is going to help navigate that process, really thinking about, you know, making sure everybody know who's on first, that kind of a thing. They'll do things like review design phase submittals, review CMR pay applications, review, you know, change orders for the project, and just kind of spot check and make sure that things are going as smoothly as you'd want them to be, and really to help run down issues that pop up. You know, and again, the size and complexity of your project with multiple sites, a relatively aggressive schedule that'll require, professional insight and assistance, is something that your owner's representative is really going to be able to assist with and benefit the project. And then I think at the end of the day, it's going to alleviate the district's staff of performing this really heavy oversight and coordination of all of these construction professionals. With 6 projects moving at the same time, it will be incredibly beneficial to have an owner's representative. And just to, as a frame of reference and as an example, Upper Arlington has a building project that is going on right now that is a little smaller than yours, but they've also got an owner's representative assisting with that because they've got multiple buildings and different locations that are all going on at the same time, and they've really seen a tremendous value from having that position on the project. And so, with that, we'll talk a little bit about the procurement process. It's a shorter process. It's just an RFP. You just put an RFP out. And then you review those pricing and responses back once they come in. Conduct interviews of firms that you'd like to speak with to see what they can help you with on the project, and then you can make your selection. So it will look a lot like the architect procurement and the CMR procurement, but it'll be a little bit abbreviated in that they'll give you their pricing and their proposal right up front with their initial package. So it'll be a shorter process, but it'll be informative nevertheless. So with that, is there any questions that anybody has about the owner's rep role and what value that will bring to the project?
Does anyone know at this point what the anticipated time frame is for the owner's rep? Is the RFP already out? Where are we in that process?
Yeah, we have not. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that's it. Go ahead.
Okay. We have not put the RFP out yet. We've got it. We were seeing how far we're probably going to end up putting it out next week or maybe the week after. We wanted to let the CMR process unfold a little bit. We suspect that maybe some of the CMR firms will put in to be owner's rep as well. We're not quite sure about that, but we're giving some consideration as to when we want that to drop, but it's gonna drop in the next week, maybe 2 weeks. And then we'll have a pretty short time frame for them to turn around and get us their proposals. So we'll have a lot of information for you on that front in a relatively short period of time.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
I have a couple questions. Why would we need a third position if the architect should be working in our best interest and the CMR should also be working in our best interest? Why would we need this owner's representative position? That's my first question. And the other question I have is this third position basically kind of an antagonistic, like a counterweight that we're adding to the process? Is that what we're going for? And is it usually filled by a firm that didn't get one of the two earlier positions? Those are
all great questions, and I'm just writing them down. So the first question you asked is why would you need an owner's rep firm? And and I do get this question quite a bit, and it does resonate. The issue is, and I'll rephrase the question: why do you need somebody else with another set of eyes on the project? And the reality of it is that your owner's rep is going to help identify issues on the project that might not otherwise catch the eye of the architect or catch the eye of the construction manager at risk, and is also going to help translate what's going on the projects for your administration to make sure that you've got as much information as you could possibly have about the project in real time. And I will give you an example. going to give you a negative example only because I'm a lawyer and I always get wrapped around the axle of negative situations. If you have a situation where there is a issue with the architect, a design issue, there are multiple change orders that are landing on the project that are for, quite a bit of money. And you're trying to understand what the issue is with the change orders and why they are occurring. Your construction manager is going to get paid for those change orders. And so the mindset might be, well, he's getting paid for it, so he's going to be in favor of the change order. Your architect is going to be, not wanting to be blamed for that particular issue, and so might, characterize it in a certain way. And I don't mean to put anything negative on design professionals or on construction managers, but the reality of it is you've got 6 buildings going in, and I have yet to be on a project where there's not a change order. And I also have yet to be on a project where a board hasn't had a question about one of those change orders that really cuts to the bone, and they want to understand exactly what's going on. And they want to hear what's going on from somebody who doesn't have a horse in the race other than the best interest of the owner. And so that's where your owner's rep comes in. And on a project of this size, you're going to be faced with those issues. I mean, you were faced with those issues on the Lincoln project, and your staff was able to handle that because of that. That project was certainly manageable for them. But on a project of this size, where you've got 6 buildings, 6 things going on at the same time, things are going to be moving around very quickly. You're going to want to have that type of an entity on the project to help you navigate those types of issues. And I can certainly give you a few war stories, if a few additional war stories, if you like, where one of the consultants that you'll have on your project is a commissioning agent. And so the commissioning agent goes back and forth between the contractor and the design professional to help make sure that the HVAC systems in the building are installed correctly. And that entity writes reports about what happens and what they see as they go through the testing process. And the owner's rep is spot on all of those reports. And I've had any number of projects where the first call I received from a representative is an owner's rep saying, McCloskey, we got an issue here that we need to help you, have us deal with. And so we just try and help navigate through that. But the owner's rep is really the entity that, I hate using this phrase, but it fits perfectly. They just know where all the bodies are buried on the project, and they've got the owner's best interest at heart. And so that leads into your next question. Is it an antagonistic role that we are creating out there by having an owner's rep? And the answer is no. Your typical owner's rep, especially the very good ones, which is what you'll get on this project, they're not out there to show their value by dragging down the architect or dragging down the construction manager. They're out there to help facilitate the project, and they're out there to help drive a solution. And I happened to be in a meeting, it was a large building project, and the owner's rep was in there, and the architect and the construction manager were kind of going back and forth about who was responsible for what. And the owner's rep, as construction is, pounded his fist on the table and said, how about you both follow the contract? Let's start there. That kind of, it's a leveling thing. It's not intended to be an antagonistic role in any event. It is really just to help you as a owner of a massive building project navigate that project. And then the third question you asked was, is it typical for one of the construction managers at risk that is not chosen to fill the role of an owner's rep? And what I will say is, and instead of saying yes or no to that, what I will say is there are certainly construction managers at risk that also serve as owners' reps. And so there are certainly folks in the crew, the very high caliber crew that you've received for this project, the CMR firms, there are certainly folks in that bunch that function as owners' reps. And if they are not awarded some aspect of the project, might want to throw their hat in the ring to be the owner's rep. There are also very strong owner's rep firms that do nothing else but serve as owner's reps. And so I think it would behoove us to hear from both maybe the folks in the pool that want to serve in that role, and then also folks outside that may want to come in and respond to an RFP and show you what they could bring to the table.
before you move, I think Daphne has a question too, but before you move beyond that one point, can you just dig in a little bit deeper on the possibility that we get the same firm bidding for owner's rep as who submitted for CMR? I guess, can you just give a little bit of detail about how the firms themselves handle that? I mean, is it separate divisions of the firm? Just for our understanding and community's understanding.
Yeah. So they may be the same individuals. It would just depend on what team they propose to staff your project. And so right now they're going to come to the table with their proposals, and they're going to identify who they think is going to staff the project. And they may staff it in a different way than they might staff as a construction manager, as an agent, than they might staff it as an owner's rep. And some of the larger firms, they've got owner's rep folks in their organization that's all they do. They just serve as owner's reps, and that's how they function, and they're very good at it. Others might not. Others might say, I'll take this same team and I'll put them on your project as the owner's rep team. We'll learn more about that through the RFP process, and we'll be able to take the RFP that they gave us for their construction manager risk services, and then lay that next to, if they do, submit RFP for owner's rep services, and just toggle back and forth and just see what differences they're thinking, how they're approaching the project differently.
Chris, my question is, could or have you seen the owner's rep role be a source of communication between, for a school district, the board? And I mean, obviously they're going to be with the administration, but then taking it one step further to be the communication conduit to the board.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, you can, and it's all in the types of services that you want to contract for with them. If you wanted to have a monthly report out from your owner's rep, in the board meeting, you could certainly do that. I mean, that can certainly be one element of what it is that they do for you. They might prepare a monthly report for you so that you can actually, see what the status of the project is on all of these various fronts. And we can weave that into the RFP, certainly, if that's something that you'd be interested in, and just so that they can talk to us about what that might look like.
I would be a proponent of that. I don't know about my colleagues.
Doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, I would be a proponent of that as well. I think that's an important question, and I'm glad you asked it. I mean, I think that while they're certainly working for the administration on a day-to-day basis, I think the board has obvious fiduciary responsibilities and oversight. And I think any sort of additional reporting, not just to the board, and whether it's in the finance/buildings committee or whether it's the full board once a month, I guess I don't necessarily have a preference, as long as that it's something that's on a regular cadence. And then I think even reports that could be posted on the website that could go out to the community as well, so that we can track progress and show people where we are. I mean, I think that's going to be an important element to an owner's rep that adds a personal, it's beyond just like the actual site issues and construction and design issues. It's that continuation of public outreach and public information that I think is going to set an owner's rep role apart from those other two functions as well.
Yep, that's a great point. And I've certainly seen reports, monthly reports from owners rep firms on projects where they one of them that was pretty nice. It was an aerial shot of the site. It was just a single building project, but it was an aerial shot of the site. And then it was just a comment on where you are with the budget, and then it was a comment on what the schedule's looking like, and just kind of not getting straight into the weeds of everything, but a nice high level report out so that you can just get a flavor for where things are and what's happening. And certainly if there are any strings in there that you'd want to pull on and just get a little bit more information, that's a great jumping off point to use. So with that, I don't have any additional information for you. If you've got any other questions about the owner's rep service, I can certainly answer them. But we'll look to get that out, like I said, the RFP for that service in the next week or two, and we'll certainly add the monthly report out component just to see what it is that they would have to say about that. And we'll have a lot more information for you here very shortly.
Anybody have any other questions about, really about any of it? The owner's rep, the CMR, the architect, any of the processes? While everybody's still here, does anybody want to ask any other questions? Steve, is there anything that you want to add at all about the process or?
No, I just want to, everybody's time's valuable, and I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I think this was really educational and important as we begin to go through these processes. Things will move very, very quickly. And so I think this discussion was very good, and we, came to some things I never, would have thought of the owner's rep reporting out, but what a great idea, having pictures and aerial shots and all the things that Chris talked about. So we really appreciate your input and your guidance. This recording of this will be an important thing for our community to see if they weren't able to log in to YouTube, but they'll be informed of the process. And so I just want to thank Casey and Amy and Chris for being here tonight. Very nicely done. Very helpful tonight.
Hey, Steve, speaking of the recording, will we be able to sort of post it and cut it so that people who want to understand about the building process don't have to sit through the entire COVID committee meeting in order to get to that? And so it's just kind of an easy way for them to get right to this content.
Yeah, let me see if we can do that. I think we should be able to do that. If it's not, if we can't do it, then what we can do is at least inform people when it starts and ends, minutes, right? So, but I think it can be done.
I think our high schoolers could probably do it.
Yeah, you're right.
Our TV class, right?
Yeah.
Just comment that he can do that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, so before we move on, we do have an item for board action, which is actually taking action on the recommendation that we agree to authorize the superintendent to work with other administrators and legal counsel to enter into negotiations. But right before I move into the board action, I just want to make sure, are there any other questions before that?
Do you want Chris or Casey or Amy to explain the resolution? So it's not a fait accompli, right? It's just, I think you said that, Bill. It's just,
I mean, it's right. Let's get, I guess, we'll get the motion on the table and then open it for discussion again. And at that point, it would be great if, I don't want to read the resolution. So it would be wonderful if either Chris or Amy could explain it, just kind of a synopsis of what it's authorizing after we get the motion on the table.
So I move that we accept the resolution as presented in the agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Is there a second?
A second, Mrs.
Thank you,
Chrysler.
Mrs. Chrysler. Any discussion? I guess either Chris or Amy, could one of you just kind of, without reading the resolution, can you just kind of explain in brief what we are authorizing?
Sure. Amy, do you want to take a run at that?
Sure. So the resolution that you have in front of you today is to select DLR Group as the architect, partnering with Shore. And what this does is it allows the superintendent to enter into negotiations and come up with an agreement and a fee proposal. We'll get a fee proposal from DLR. And then once we have the fee proposal and the agreement negotiated, we will come back to the board and we will get approval from the board to approve the agreement and the agreement amount. So tonight would be the approval of the evaluation committee's recommendation to select. And sorry, it's my kid's bedtime. It's the recommendation to select is the approval for that. And next time we'll bring back the approval of the agreement.
Okay. Any questions from board members or any other comments? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
I'm sorry, yeah, Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Moore.
Yes.
And is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Nobody wants to go home? I guess we are already.
We all did it at the same time.
Thanks, Mrs. Chrysler. Any discussion at all? Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll one more time?
Ms. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston. Mr. Hairston?
Yes.
Sorry.
It's 8.
I didn't hear you.
Did you get it, Mr. Verlingo?
Yes.
Did you? Okay. It's 8:31 p.m. We are adjourned. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Night.
Right, thank you.